Welcome to the Noir Poise podcast, where wisdom is power is more than just a motto.
It's our way of life. While we don't claim to have all the answers, we're dedicated to delving deeper into different topics through meaningful conversations. As a duo, we bring different viewpoints to the table, enriching our joint journey towards growth and poise.
Join us as we explore and unlearn to relearn while striving to navigate life with poise. I've always had this mentality from the time that I was young that every decision we make some way, somehow impacts our future, and we kind of have to face the consequences of our actions. I use this phrase all the time. Life is really just cause and effect. We don't often recognize where the cause stems from, and we see the effects, but I think a lot of the causes stem from our decisions, whether it's our personal decisions, our parents' decisions, the people around us, but everything ultimately, in my opinion, is cause and effect. I read this quote by Eleanor Roosevelt that read, "In the long run, we shape our lives and we shape ourselves. The process never ends until we die, and the choices we make are ultimately our own responsibility."
Do you think that's every choice or just major choices?
I think it's every choice. I do feel like, and that's why I specified on the fact that whether it's our choice, our parents' choice, or other, people around us, because at the end of the day, we don't choose what life we get to have in the beginning, right? We kind of just find ourselves in certain situations. We find ourselves in certain families, so on and so forth. But I think as adults, yes, every single choice we make, I think ultimately shapes our life.
And I'm very practical.
Yeah.
When I ask if it's every choice, I literally mean, is it every choice? Meaning what you have for breakfast, what you decide to wear. Yeah, you believe that.
I know that may sound silly, but personally to me, yeah. I think obviously small choices may not have big impacts all the time, but there are cases when it can. But yeah, for me, every little choice, obviously, yeah, people are probably going to hear this and be like, yeah, so the color socks I choose to wear is going to affect my life. Not necessarily. That's not what I'm necessarily saying. But at the end of the day, to some extent, that can. Like, you could wear the wrong shoes depending on the weather. You break your back, and something that simple led to a drastic effect. So while, yeah, I can understand you, because I could see how you're looking at me. So the color socks you choose to wear may not have such a huge impact. But the point I'm trying to make is that every small decision we make in life can have impact on our life.
You know what's crazy? I do agree with that to some extent, but my perception of it is sometimes you don't realize when a small decision could lead to a big decision, and in that
True.
case, it changes everything. Because the story that comes to mind is when I was in LaGuardia Community College, and I hated that college. I still hate that college now. Anyone who goes
it's
to
a
CUNY,
community college.
anyone who goes to CUNY or who went to CUNY knows that you're set up for failure. They'll tell you something in the beginning of the semester, and then by the midpoint or the end of the semester, they tell you something else.
It's
you
cheap
realize,
for a reason.
Yeah,
the goal is to keep you there as long as they
missed
can.
out on so much, or they made you take the wrong class. So I had that same exact situation happen to me. It was when I just transferred or changed my major to journalism or communications. And they told me this is all you need to graduate. So I literally told my parents, this is when I'm going to finish.
Ooh.
Yeah, my Haitian parents, I told them when I was going to finish. So I had that expectation. It wasn't until near the end of the semester that I don't remember exactly what they told me, but they told me something that set me back completely. It was almost as if I wasted the whole entire year. So
that's crazy.
I remember the feeling of going to class after I spoke with the counselor and just feeling so defeated and just sitting there listening to the lecture, and something told me to go to the bathroom. And at that point, just for context, the professor at that time said in the very beginning of the semester, if you have to use the bathroom, go before. Don't get up and just go
Mm-hmm.
to the bathroom. But I felt the push to go to the bathroom. So finally, I just got up and I didn't even have to go to the bathroom. So I just walked around. When I got to the bathroom, there was a sign that said bathroom closed. So now I'm like, all right, gee, thanks, conscious. Like, you made me go all the way here for no reason. But then I'm like, I'm already out. I don't know if I'm getting in trouble if I go back in because they already.
Trouble. Jesus, it's college.
I know, but he had said he doesn't like when people
My
just
God,
leave
it
the
sounded like
classroom, the bathroom.
elementary school for a
So
second.
I didn't know if he was gonna lock the door on me or whatever the case is. I said, you know what? I'm already out. Let me just go to the next floor. I go to the next floor. I pass by the bathroom and I see that I think at this time it was probably like December 5th or something like that. And I see last day for open enrollment in person for Brooklyn College, December 6th.
Mm.
And Brooklyn College was, I think, the CUNY school that had the best journalism curriculum.
Yeah, they did.
So I went the very next day and signed up for Brooklyn College, and within like a year or so, I was able to graduate with my bachelor's in
From
journalism.
Brooklyn
Whereas before, I
College.
would have just gotten an associate's in
Right.
communication. And I say the story just to reiterate how that one simple decision
Change the trajectory of your life.
literally changed the trajectory of my life. If I had
Yep.
been stubborn and said I wouldn't have gotten up, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
annoyed, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, I would have missed that opportunity because that was
Mm.
literally the last day. The next day was the last day. So with that context, I do understand how every choice you make can change your life.
I feel like even if we don't notice the change immediately, there is a change that occurs that has not shown in the physical yet. That's just my perspective. I think of it spiritually, to be honest with you. I do think that a lot of times when we make certain decisions, we may not see the effects of those decisions within a day or two or right away, the way that you did. But ultimately, something always occurs. My opinion, y'all. I feel like something always occurs in the spiritual that will ultimately then be, what's the word I'm looking for? Then be illustrated in the physical form at some point in time. And it could be something as simple as like who you choose to date, or moving out of home at a certain period in time, or what job you decide to take. Like at the end of the day, everything we do, I believe, leads us to where we are, or everything we did led us to where we are.
I heard this or heard someone say this before, and I'm gonna paraphrase because I don't have to quote. But he said, "No matter where you are in life, you chose to be there." Do you
Bro,
agree with that?
yeah. I It's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Listen, I struggle with it too. I'm not gonna lie, but although I've always had the mentality like I'm gonna be very particular about my decisions. Like most people will say, I play life safe, and that's not a great thing because in order to get to certain places, sometimes you have to take risks. I'm now in my adulthood taking certain type of risks, but to be honest with you, I like to plan and analyze and figure out, okay, this is plan A. This is plan B if plan A don't work out. This is plan C if plan B don't work out. This is plan D, like, and so on and so forth. Like, I really do operate safely. That has worked to my advantage to some extent, but it also has affected me negatively too. There are certain places where I feel like I could have been, and unfortunately, I'm not because I didn't take certain risks. But although I am a safe person, which is because of that mindset that I know that every decision affects my future. So I guess there should be balance, right? So I'm working on that. But I agree with it, even though it's a tough pill to swallow, because I really do think life is cause and effect. I really do think every decision we make, whether we notice it or not, it impacts our future. And sometimes the impact may not even be shown in your life, but maybe shown in your children's life.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are certain things we're going through now. It's not based on our decisions. It's based on our parents' decisions
Very
or our
true.
grandparents' decisions. Whether it was positive or negative, we're dealing with certain things because of, past decisions. So that's why I say like life is cause and effect in every single decision. While we may not see it right away, it will affect your future one way or another.
As you were talking, I'm not gonna lie, I was like, it could drive someone crazy to think like every
Yeah.
little action you have or you take could have, some kind of other reaction.
It can
But
sometimes stunt your growth,
yeah,
honestly. Yeah, if
but
you're taking it too literal, yeah.
actually, while you're speaking, I quickly Google this because I'm like, I feel like there's something that it's reminding me of, and it actually reminded me of Newton's third law of action and reaction, which
Mm.
states that every action force in nature, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Meaning,
Read that again.
every
Sorry.
every action in nature, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So
Mm.
that means no matter what you do, it's going to either lead to a positive reaction or a negative reaction. So I have to ask you now, with that in mind, how do you live your life if you really believe this?
Well, I kind of just told you. For a long time, I've lived safely. I am very cautious about the decisions I make. And I think there's good that may come from that, but I think I took it too far. I took it too far where like I may have missed out on certain opportunities. I may have stunted my growth in certain aspects because I'm just like, ugh, if I take this risks, specifically with finances, where I'm like, there are so many ideas and things that I wanted to do, that I'm interested in, but it's so left field from what I was doing prior. I was in corporate and healthcare, and everything that I was interested in has always been way like super far from that field. And so I played it safe. An example would be like graduating with my pre-med. I knew I didn't want to go to medical school before I graduated, but I'm like, the best decision right now seems to be for me to just finish this. I only have a year and a half left. I'm closer to getting the bachelor's than not, so I might as well finish it up and figure it out after. At least I'll be able to find a job that will give me steady income rather than the part-time gigs I was doing at the time, and then I can figure it out while I'm working. So when I say play it safe, like that's the kind of safe I mean, whereas some people could have had so much confidence in their dreams and their goals that they're just like, forget this. I know I don't want to go to med school. Forget this bachelor's. I'm just going to start now. I'll be ahead a year and a half. And kudos to all those people who have that kind of, attitude, because they're probably much further. But for me, I like to analyze situations a little too much. Sometimes, like I said, it worked to my benefit, but sometimes I do think it can be detrimental. So back then, I would say it wasn't probably the best way to live. I think there needs to be some form of balance, like knowing when to take risks and knowing when to operate according to what you've analyzed and what seems like it may be the best fit. And then also, because we're going to make wrong decisions, right? Like at the end of the day, no matter how much you try to calculate your steps and you do things the way that you think is the best fit, you may end up making the wrong decision. But in that wrong decision, you learn through it,
Yeah.
So I think it's all about that more so than anything.
You know what's my biggest problem with that though?
Mm.
I'm going to be completely honest. It means that I have to take 100% accountability.
That's the thing.
I can't blame it on life.
Nope.
I can't pray for it.
Nope.
I can't blame it on the devil or nothing.
Nope.
It's all up to me.
It's all up to you. And I think that's the importance when you, at least for me now in my adulthood, like, we've been really trying to take accountability for our actions, our thoughts, our situation, where we're at. And we're starting to make a lot of tough decisions that a lot of people may not understand right now. And we're making them because we know how much every decision that we decide to make now is not only going to impact our future, but it's going to impact our daughter's future. So accountability to me is like the step one of it, I feel. And that's the part that makes it hard.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily like you have to make a choice, because making a choice, yeah, it's difficult, but I think it's the part of it that's recognizing, like, at the end of the day, it's your responsibility.
Yeah.
It's up to you. So whether you make the left decision or the right decision, it's your decision. And regardless if it doesn't go according to how you wanted it to go, that's your responsibility to figure it out, learn from it, and go ahead and make a different decision. Yeah.
Another thing too is, and I can say this personally because I lived my life this way for a long time, is I relied a lot on hope.
Mm.
So where they're making,
I'm glad you mentioned that.
poor
That was something I was
decisions.
going to mention, hope, because I think a lot of times that's what holds us back.
where they're making a poor decision or no decision at all, my background made me say all I have to do is hope, and everything will like kind of fall into place. But I had to realize that in life, either you make a choice or a choice is made for you.
100% true. And that's what I had to learn, to be honest with you, because I think we're taught that. We're taught to rely on fate and faith rather than taking accountability for what we could have done better on. We hear it all the time as Haitian Christians. Like, if something goes well, it was God's will. If something goes opposite of what they wanted, bon Dieu grand moun li fait salver.
Like that's what we done. Like, yeah.
Yeah, like translating that, God is an adult, he does what he wants. The more I sit and ponder on these different type of like mindsets, I start realizing how, and again, this is my opinion, to each his own, but I really feel like we use statements like that to make excuses for ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't want to take accountability in how we could have operated different. Something simple that I noticed, like, because we're surrounded by it in different ways, but health, weight, where people are praying for good health and people are hoping for good health, but they don't work out. They don't eat healthy. And it's just like, how do you expect the food that you're eating to provide you with the results that you're craving? It doesn't add up. And unfortunately, to some extent, faith, well, the misconception in faith, I should say, because I honestly don't think God operates that way, but I do think that our hope and faith in God has made people create that narrative in their mind to focus on hope that God can do anything, when it's just like, yeah, he can. And I say this all the time. Yes, God can do anything, but will he though, if you're not doing your part? You know what I mean? So that's a simple narrative that like we witness all the time, where it's just like people are trying to lose weight or whatever the case is. And of course, we're not in the greatest shape of our lives. We talked about this in a previous podcast, you know, like it's all about progress. But we've decided that, like, you know what, we want to make changes that are going to change our lifestyle, not necessarily do like a diet fad or so on and so forth. So for a long time, we've been slowly but surely changing the way that we eat. Years ago, we gave up meat. Years ago, we decided, you know, we want to cut back on rice. As Haitians, rice and beans is a staple. You eat it every single day with the meat. Like, that's a staple. Yeah, son. It's a staple. And while, yes, it is bomb, it tastes great. Our foods are great, but you, at some point, you got to sit back and think, now, is this a generational curse? Is it generational genetics? Or is it decisions? Is it generational poor decisions that we keep making over and over, and we're eating the same way? If I'm eating the same way my mom's eating, and my mom was eating the same way her grandmother's eating, and God forbid I go to the doctor and they tell me I have a certain condition that my mom and grandmother had, at that point, yeah, genetics may be a factor, but I think it's more so the decisions aspect of it. And I think that's the part that we often don't do, myself included, where we don't sit down and take accountability for our everyday decisions. So if you decide to eat that bread versus the soup, there's going to be consequences. You're not going to see it today or tomorrow. You may see it 20 years from now, but that's just the facts.
Society does teach us, or at least it taught me, that there are certain things that are beyond your control. And while that may be true to some case,
yeah,
I've had to slowly and humbly accept that there are a lot of things that I made it seem like it wasn't my choice, but it was clearly my choice, like health and exercise. Even now, I think this is the longest I've spent without actually working out or anything. And for a long time, I made excuses.
Yeah.
It's because work was really busy. I'm waking up early, going to sleep late, and then we had a child, and
yeah,
now, that takes.
I'm a father. I can't. It's all excuses.
But I had to tell myself what I told you I implemented, which is, if someone offered me $1 million, would I be able to do it? If the answer is yes, then realistically, you're making an excuse.
I love that you say that, because I ask myself that sometimes too, because I think we often don't realize when we're making excuses. And that's the good part about having an accountability partner sometimes, where you have someone to kind of like check you if you ain't checking yourself. Realistically, we often make excuses. I really think 80% of the time is excuses. That's my percentage, by the way. 80% of the time, I think we do make excuses. Of course, life happens. Like, there are situations where lifes And we say this all the time. You get lemons thrown at you and you have to be forced to make lemonade with it. But again, it goes back to how you take that situation and then learn from it in order to do better down the line. We can either accept that negativity or we can take that negativity and push it towards positivity.
Right.
Yeah. And that's hard to do. I'm not gonna lie, because I'd be the first one like, ugh, life.
It's like a saying I heard where we were taught that history repeats itself, but someone said history doesn't repeat itself, people do. So we keep doing the same thing, expecting different results.
Crazy.
Kind of thing. But we've had
We're
this
all
discussion
crazy.
before.
Literally, we are.
We've had the discussion before, and that's actually a driving force behind my determination. Is because I had to realize that as far as my life goes, if I don't make it happen, it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So to be quite honest with you, that has eliminated almost completely the idea of fate. And fate as an F-A-T-E.
Yeah, I was just about to tell you, spell that, please.
Fate as an
people get at you.
F-A-T-E, because I think one thing that definitely crippled me is, like I said, having hope. Thinking that there's some...
Whatever's meant to be will be.
Whatever's meant to be is going to be.
Yeah.
No matter what you do, in 10 years, if you're supposed to be somewhere, you're going to get there because it's destined to happen. That's not true.
I think we're lazy.
Yeah.
It's hard to admit it, but I think as people, we really get lazy and then we make excuses. So we be like, if it's meant to happen, it's going to happen. Don't get me wrong. I do think a portion of that is true, but you got to do your part. You got to do your part. You can't just be chilling and be like, okay, I'm just going to apply to this job. Whatever's meant to be will be. Are you going out there and actually looking for it? You know what I mean? Like, are you networking? Like, there's so much more to the work aspect of it that we tend to negate, and we make excuses. We're really just lazy mentally, I think.
But that's actually what I wanted to ask you is, so what role, in your opinion, because you still believe in fate to some extent, right?
Yes. I had to think about it. But yeah, I do still believe in it in the sense, like, I think there's a time for everything. Yeah, I think there's a time for everything. And while we may be putting all the effort and work, at some point in time, it is going to work if you keep on evolving and pivoting where needed and doing what you got to do to get something done. But the fate aspect for me is more so it occurs when you're prepared for it. And oftentimes we think we're prepared, but we're not. So it may look like I'm doing all I can. I'm doing everything I should be doing in this moment, because I've been in that situation where I'm just like, what's going on? I feel like I'm doing everything I could possibly do based on the knowledge that I have and what I'm being told that I should be due for a particular result. And I'm not getting that result. And I had to hold myself accountable and realize that, like, I wasn't mentally prepared for it. I wasn't mentally prepared for the results that I was seeking. And so that's where I feel like fate comes into play. It's not necessarily like if I sat there and did nothing, it would have happened anyway. Maybe I'm taking the term fate out of context, but fate in the sense that there is a timing for everything. And it's our responsibility to do everything we're supposed to be doing up until that time does present itself. Because what happens is, if we don't do the things that we're supposed to do, when that time comes around, it won't occur.
Okay, so that's where I start to not see it as fate anymore, because the way I see fate is, no matter what you do, whether positive or negative, certain things are going to happen. So if you're meant to meet your spouse, I don't know, in church, fate to me means no matter what you do, you could be, living the most conservative life to the most, out there life. You're going to end up meeting your spouse in church. That to me is what fate is. Whereas the way I see it is, if you're meant to meet your spouse in church, you need to live your life accordingly so that when that time comes, you're prepared. So if I think if you have some kind of decision in it, then it's no longer fate. That's the way I see it.
Okay, so maybe I'm misunderstanding that term. And this is where I pull out my handy dandy dictionary, because I say this all the time. Sometimes we think we know what a word means, and then you're just like, wait, let me read it again. Hold on. So fate is, according to definitions from Oxford Languages, fate is the development of events beyond a person's control, regarded as determined by a supernatural power. Okay. So I don't know. I kind of feel like they work together. But that may not be a popular opinion.
Either it works with our input or it doesn't work with our input. That's what I mean. Like, if it works with our input, then it's no longer fate. It's just probability. Like, maybe the likelihood of you, using the same example, meeting your spouse in church is highly likely because you're in church, not because you're necessarily destined to meet them.
I
Versus
see what
fate
you're
would be,
saying.
no matter where you are in the world, what you're doing in life, you're gonna meet this person at the specific designated time. I'm not saying that I know all. This is just the way I'm thinking, because I do believe in fate on a global scale, just
Hmm.
not on an individual scale.
Yeah, because I was just about to say, I feel like there's certain instances where I do believe in fate, but in the examples that we're using, um, I do feel like it has a lot to do with accountability and you putting in the work. So I don't know. I just maybe I'm thinking of this wrong. I feel like it works together.
It could, like,
I know it says like
I
it.
don't know all the answers, of
Yeah,
course.
it says it's the development of events beyond a person's control. So I do think there are things in life that occur beyond our control. But the reason why I'm saying I think it kind of works together is because, like I mentioned earlier, when lives, we then have a decision on how we operate with those events. So that's where I'm like, yeah, there are things that will happen beyond our control, right? If that's quote unquote fate, then that's fate. But there are things that happens beyond our control, whether that's negative or positive, but we ultimately make the decision on what we want to do with that. Do you get what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's why in my mind, I'm like, I feel like it kind of still correlates together. Cause like, let's say someone gets fired from a job, right? They were the best employee. They did everything they had to do, so on and so forth. And it just so happens that the job is going out of business and they had to lay off people. Maybe that's fate. I don't know. But that person can now make a decision to mope and moan and be depressed about it, which is understandable, right? Or that person has the decision to be like, I'm going to take this opportunity to start working on some of the goals that I've always wanted to do anyway. And those goals lead to them making it big. They can say that that's fate, that they were meant
Yeah.
to kind of be that person and that's why they lost a job. But I just feel like at the end of the day, it's all about decisions too. Like they correlate to some extent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my take on it. So I don't think that fate is just like no matter what you're going to be big. No, that's not how I always viewed fate. I viewed fate more so as like things happen and it's up to us on what we do with those things.
Would it be right to say fate is a combination of opportunity and right timing?
Yeah, maybe.
Mm.
I don't want to say yes because I really don't know. But maybe life will always give you different scenarios. Sometimes people think good things happen to people and they don't know why it happened. Sometimes bad things happen to people and they don't know why it happened. But at the end of the day, it's all about what you do with that. A good thing can happen to someone and they make all the wrong decisions and that good thing now is a horrible thing for them.
Yeah.
And vice versa. A negative thing can happen and that person chooses to learn from it and build from it and gain strength from it and make multiple decisions after the fact that leads them towards a path that they maybe was always supposed to be on.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, we make decisions that will lead us to a specific location.
I got another question for you.
Okay.
Do you think we create our own fate, whether we realize it or not? Because, for
The
example,
Christian in me wants to say no. But at the same time, I'm trying to think logically.
let me give you an example of what I
Okay.
mean by that. So, someone who says to themselves, I want to be able to, I don't know, buy an island and move all my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
They had that image set in their mind since they were young.
Mm-hmm.
They work hard to make it happen and it finally happens. They
Mm-hmm.
may say, this is fate. This is what I always knew that was going to happen, that should happen, or I wanted, or whatever. So, in an example like that, it makes me wonder, when we see things as fate, is it maybe our own conscious or subconscious that literally projected what we want and we eventually got what we want?
That's interesting. I kind of can see that. Logically speaking, if I'm honest with you, I do think we ultimately do create our fate.
Mm.
Because you can have hope in something happening, but if you're not putting any type of work into it, it's not going to happen. And maybe it does happen. Let's just say maybe someone's like hoping and wishing that they get like money, right? And they happen to win the lottery. they may consider that quote unquote fate. But now, if you make all the wrong decisions and you end up more broke than you were before you had that lottery ticket, is it still fate? So it could be a situation where we create certain perceptions in our minds and we tell ourselves it's fate when in reality it's just an effect.
Yeah.
That could be it. Who knows? I don't know. But that was a really good question. At the end of the day, we have to do some form of preparation for the things that we desire. We have a choice. And what you just said was really deep. It honestly has me thinking, and I'm trying to like put my thoughts into words and it's not coming out. But that triggered a lot of thoughts for me.
That's the scary part. Well, it's only scary if you don't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the both scary and great part of choices. It's because I believe our choices create our fate.
I love that.
So using the example you gave earlier about, your grandmother or your grandparents had, I don't know, high blood pressure, your parents had high blood pressure. The choices you're making now may lead you to high blood pressure, and you'll think it's fate. You think you're just living a normal life. You don't want high blood pressure, but the choices you're making is eventually there. I think a lot of things that happens to us is because subconsciously we're making a choice. And that's kind of like what I said earlier. Unless you make a choice is kind of made for you, but that's still you. I've heard this actually used with money, where a lot of people have a poverty mindset, expecting to get rich, but their choices are creating the fate that you'll always be in poverty.
Right.
Because the rich mindset is, I'm going to build on something. I'm going to work hard and build on something that I'm going to be able to keep and maintain. It's not going to come overnight, but I know one day it's going to come. The poor mindset is, I need to hit some kind of jackpot. And you kind of get a high. That's how people get a high from, the lottery or gambling or whatever the case is. So you don't realize that you're creating the fate of poverty, always repeating that cycle. Another powerful lesson I learned about this is, you don't get what you want, you get what you are. So if the choices you're making is contradicting from what you actually want in life, then you're always going to get what you are. Using again the diet example, where if you're eating unhealthy, despite how much you may think, in 5 years you're gonna be fit, like that was me, where I used to think to myself, in a couple months I'm gonna be fit, but then I'm not exercising, I'm not eating like I should.
Right.
So no matter how much I want to be fit, the choices I'm making is creating the fate,
contradicting to what you
creating
want.
the fate that I'm not going to be fit. So it's not really what you want, is really the choices you make.
I love that. That reminds me of a video I saw of this woman who said, you're not getting what you want because you need to make a complete identity shift in order to become the person that will be able to get what you're desiring. Like, I'm paraphrasing, but I always remember that because I think that's part of the issue, is that we're often comfortable where we are and who we are. And so because we're comfortable, we then can't take accountability on where we can improve. And the minute you start to think that you are entirely doing the right thing, you have all the right answers and so on and so forth, I think that's where it becomes dangerous, because it'll become more difficult for you to be able to take accountability for what it is that you could be improving on, or what you could be changing, or parts of your identity that just don't resonate with the results that you're seeking. That's one of the things, honestly, I ain't gonna lie, it's hard. It's hard. It's so hard, but it's one of the things like I've been trying to apply on a regular basis, like in everything in our relationship, with family, with goals that we have, finances. Like, I have to always remind myself that I'm going to attract what I am. And in order to do that, I have to be a representation of the things that I want to attract.
Yep.
It takes a lot of accountability. It takes a lot of like reflection and trying to dissect what areas you could have done better on.
You honestly operate differently when you know it's only up to you. when you don't believe that an outside source will get you what you want, or a loved one will help you, when you realize that
You have no
anything you
choice.
want is up to you. If you don't work, you're not going to get it.
That's
I feel
funny.
like you just move.
You got to make a
differently.
choice because you got no choice.
Right, literally.
That's funny. So with this mindset that at the end of the day, it's our choice, and where we are is due to our choices. What would you say for people who have dealt with like severe traumatic experiences and it's difficult for them to get out of a certain loop because of their past, because of what they've been through? Would you still say that where they are is due to their choices?
I believe our own choices, we're responsible for that.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not necessarily responsible for globally what happens. And there's a lot of things that happen to people that wasn't their fault at all.
Right.
And I can never speak for those people who are in certain traumatic situations because I've never been there, and I don't believe in speaking for if I haven't experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
it's obviously not fair comparing someone who went through traumatic experience to someone who didn't.
Yeah.
But I think foundationally, I'm not gonna say solution, but I think on the foundation side, it still comes back to choice.
It's a sensitive topic, but I'm like, we can't talk about where you're at because of decisions you've made, when in reality there are a lot of people out there where a lot of the decisions were made for them, unfortunately, and they're still dealing with it as adult. I mean, we talk about it all the time, how we're still unlearning certain things that happened to us in our childhood, and sometimes it's just emotional stuff. So I wanted to touch on that because some people may listen to this and be like, that's unfair to say. To some extent, it is kind of unfair to say. And although everyone's situation is always going to look different, and I think it goes back to remembering that life be lifing, but we still to some extent have a choice. It's just harder to make that choice every single day, and it's harder for us to pick up and keep on moving. It may be harder for one person than it is for another. But I saw this, it said, if something traumatic happened to you, either you can become wise or you can become wounded, but you ultimately choose. When I first heard it, I was kind of low-key offended for the people dealing with trauma. If I'm honest with you, I was just like, what? There are certain situations, it's not that simple. But I kept thinking about it and thinking about it. I'm like, as difficult as it may be for those type of people who are going through situations that are extreme, use your pain to help bring joy to others to some extent, even though that's tough. And of course, we're not in people's shoes, so we'll never know how that feels. But I say all that to say, like, no matter how difficult certain things may be, no matter how life may look, we ultimately have a choice. And the choice may not necessarily be in our reaction or our action. Sometimes our choice is in our perception. Thank you for spending your time with us. We hope you gained some knowledge today that'll promote poise in your life. We have new episodes uploaded every Thursday right here, same place, same time. Until next time, you can follow us on Instagram at Noir Poise Podcast to stay connected. That's NOIRPOISED Podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback.
And remember, your wisdom is power.